Well, we are on night two of officially the legal tampering period opened yesterday at noon. This is night two of free agency. Will Joe Douglas work night hours again? I don't know. My guest is the great Rich Cimini, host of the Flight Deck podcast and Jets reporter for ESPN. Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Here we are, like I said, night two of free agency. Tomorrow, Wednesday, marks the time where teams can officially sign players to contracts. But interesting to see what Joe Douglas does tonight, as he was very active. He did sign Lakey Fotu, the defensive tackle from Arizona. So let's go. Let's bring him on. Rich Cimini. Mr. Cimini, how you doing tonight?
Well, first of all, Connor, call me Rich. You don't have to call me Mr. Cimini. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. I'm happy we could do this again.
Great to have you. I mean, I know you're very busy. Free agency is obviously very hectic. Got to report all the news. Got to hold it down. The Jets Twitter land for us. So let's get right into it. Obviously, Joe Douglas was pretty active last night in free agency. He went out. He got Javon Kinlaw. He got Tyrod Taylor. He got Tyler Sampson. He got those guys. And then he did sign Lakey Fatu earlier today. What were your thoughts on those signings, and how would you rank those guys, and how do you think they can come in and fit into the system? Obviously, a guy like Fatu is probably going to have to compete to get the defensive tackle 4 spot for next season. Tyler Sampson, there's a good chance that he's our starting guard. And then Kinlaw can be solid, and Tyrod Taylor, obviously the quarterback too, we were waiting for. So what are your thoughts, Rich?
Well, I mean, you did a great job of summarizing everything right there, Connor. Yeah, it's still early. It's only 7 o'clock. Joe Douglas usually doesn't get started for another 4 hours. So we had a late night last night with all those signings. I know Jet fans were getting a little antsy during the day with no activity. But so let's just talk about it. So I think the two defensive tackles, I think what you see in free agency, what teams do a lot is they'll sign guys to replace guys. And so in Lakey Fatu, what you see is he's the Al Woods. He's a younger version of Al Woods, a really big man, like 6'5", 330, run stuffer, first and second down. So I think he'll replace Al Woods. And with Kinlaw, a former first-round pick, by the way, so he's got a really strong pedigree, played under Saleh in San Francisco. He's had a disappointing career in San Francisco, I think mostly because of injuries, but he did play pretty well in a backup role. And I think what you see him now as the new Quentin Jefferson. I think he'll step into that role where he can give them a little bit more as a pass rush. So I think there's a chance Solomon Thomas comes back. And once he does, you're going to have that 3-man rotation again at defensive tackle, of course, alongside Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, I mean, this defensive tackle rotation is obviously very solid last year, and then there is, like you mentioned, a good chance that we do lose Quentin Jefferson. I've been hearing that kind of going around. Tough piece to lose. That's why, like you mentioned, these guys can kind of come in and replace him. I saw Fatu had like 4 pass deflections last year, so he's getting his hand up. He had a forced fumble. Not a bad guy. I'd bring him in and have him compete. I'd rather have him get the defensive tackle 4 spot than a practice squad guy like a Bradley Anai, someone like that. I'd rather guy like Fotu come in and get that spot.
Yeah, it comes down to a lot of this, Connor, comes down to money. So, you get Fotu at, I think, $2.5 million.
Yes.
I'm not sure what Kinlaw is getting. It's probably about the same. Whereas, Jefferson and Woods, Woods I don't think was really a factor. First of all, he's 36 years old. He's coming off an Achilles surgery. So I don't think he was really in consideration. But Jefferson, had a good year last year. So my older guy, 31, looking for more money. When you can save $1 million or $2 here or there, team, you have to budget very specifically for certain positions. And I think that's what the Jets are doing there. They got a lot younger at those spots. So that's important. They got younger and they got cheaper. And That's how it goes in the salary cap era.
Staying with the defense, though, obviously we brought back Chuck Clark for the safety position. Only two guys we had under contract going into free agency were Tony Adams and JBC, Jarek Bernard Converse, who really
Right.
didn't play at all last year practically. And, the Jets bring back Chuck Clark. Still a good chance from what I'm hearing. We bring Ashton Davis back. And there are some big safety names out on the market. Kevin Byard was snagged yesterday, I believe. But there's Justin Simmons is someone I'm really intrigued by. I look at him, and I think he's very solid. Could you see Joe Douglas be willing to spend around $11 million a year on
No,
that safety position?
no,
No.
no, no. Again, gets down to budget. Joe Douglas is not a believer in pouring a lot of
Yes.
money into the safety position. It's one of the reasons why he traded Jamal Adams a few years ago. And getting Chuck Clark back, was a solid move. I know they were really high on him before he blew out his knee last year. He was all set to start. I'm not ready to anoint him as the opening day starter just yet. It depends if they bring someone else in. But if all else fails, you have a 29-year-old guy who's a really good tackler. And I think not the greatest ball hawk in the world, but I think he would provide some stability there. But no, there are a lot of safeties out there. I think Ashton Davis is a possibility to come back, but not a guy who's going to make over $10 million. That just isn't the MO for this team right now.
Yeah, Joe Douglas. It's not even just safety. If you really think about it, it's most of the positions. He is a
Right.
guy who wants to just grow everyone. If you look, I mean, Bryce Huff. Unfortunately, we lost him, which I was going crazy after that 3 for 51. I mean, we gave Lawson 3 for 45. Should
Right.
be able to accommodate Huff for that $6 million when Lawson barely even played between the ACL and then got scratched a good amount
Right.
last year. But whether it's signing Bryce Huff as an undrafted free agent, getting Quincy Williams off waivers, Joe Douglas is not known for going out and spending big money on a proven guy, but it's a little different now. Joe Douglas, his whole career with the Jets, basically up until last year, was all rebuild mode, if you really, really think about it. Now they're kind of in win now mode. They have Aaron Rodgers in a two, maybe 3 year window. They got to win now. They got to get pieces in there to win. And that's what leads me to my next question. Do you see the possibility of a big trade for wide receiver too? Do you see the possibility of a T. Higgins, or do you still think they're going to go the Cortland Sutton kind of route where they get him 2 years, $13 million, a cheaper guy like him?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. Yeah, I think for the first time in Joe Douglas's tenure, he's operating under a tight cap situation. I mean, when he signed Carl Lawson for 3 for 45, the Jets had a ton of cap room that year, and they were, a little more liberal in their spending. Reality is hitting now, and they got some big contract. Wait till 2 years from now when they have
Oh
to
God.
sign Sauce
Yep.
Gardner and Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall and all those guys. Then it's going to be really a tight squeeze, especially when Aaron Rodgers' dead charge, kicks in after he's gone. But who knows? Maybe he'll be in the White House by then. You never know.
Oh God. Yeah.
Little political humor there. But
Yep.
I'm just looking at my cheat sheet here. I have my list of all free agents around the league, and I'm trying to keep track of everything. But no, I don't. You mentioned T. Higgins.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll go that route. You're talking probably $20 million a year in salary, plus a premium draft pick, probably a second rounder to get a guy like that. Cortland Sutton, I don't think will be traded because they traded Jerry Jeudy. I don't think Sean Payton wants to trade his entire receiving core. So, but I wouldn't rule out a trade. I mean, they were in on Jeudy, so they are definitely exploring the trade market. I just don't know if those two guys are there. I think they could look for a modestly priced receiver like a Tyler Boyd. Let's see who else. They're not in on Ridley. Again, Ridley's going to be massively overpaid by some teams.
Yes.
Pay him like $17 million a year, and I just don't think he's worth that.
He's
and
not.
neither do the Jets. But like a Tyler Boyd, and the guy who I wouldn't completely rule out is Odell Beckham. He is not officially a free agent until Wednesday, late Wednesday, because the way his contract, he's got this very technical language in there where it voids on the first day of the league year. But, we know he's close with Aaron Rodgers, so you can never discount him. And obviously he's not the Beckham of old, But if you look closely at his analytics from last year, they weren't all that bad. So again, I'm not saying it's a high on the front burner list, but I wouldn't completely dismiss him. This is a really, really good receiver draft. And it's a really good receiver tackle draft, offensive tackle. So that's why you see Joe Douglas proceeding with caution at those two positions, because he knows it's really deep in the draft.
Yeah, you mentioned some names there. I just got a notification. Adam Schefter reporting of ESPN breaking news. Johnson was just traded to the Panthers. So that's a target off the board for the Jets. I was hearing he was a trade target that was possible for the Jets. But going back to what you said about having to extend the Sauce, Brees, Garrett, that draft class, that's why I don't like it when everyone's talking about restructuring even more guys and pushing more money down the road. We have the $30 million hit with Rodgers. Sauce, from what I'm hearing, is going to look for around $30 million a year as a corner. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing it's around there for his price because he is just elite. I mean, he's making a case for a top 2 corner in the league right now, and he's 2 years into his NFL career. I mean, he's a 2-time All-Pro.
Yeah.
But those guys are going to command a ton of money. And then I, I I like the cheaper options in free agency, like you mentioned. Tackle, though, I still want Tyron Smith. I want to go all in on Tyron Smith. I want to pay him, like I've said, little less than his market value, and then a couple million in incentives because he hasn't played a full season since 2014, and that's a decade from now if you really think about it, which is crazy to me. 2014.
Yeah. Were
was
you even born then? You were like a
I was
2-year-old.
3.
Three. Yeah. So you've basically spanned the Tyron Smith. Yeah, but obviously Tyron Smith is not getting what he wants. Otherwise,
Yeah.
he'd be signed by now. So so he's still out there. You know, I do think the Jets probably have some interest in him. You know, it is risky because of his injury history, but when he's healthy, he's really good. And so there is some risk because of, I don't think they want a rerun of the Dwayne Brown saga, but Dwayne Brown was 37 when the Jets signed him. Tyron Smith is 33. So again, it comes down to money and also knowing that offensive tackle, they'll probably draft one with the 10th pick.
There's a good chance that they draft one, and then I've heard some ideas where we move AVT out to tackle, draft Zeitler. I mean, not draft Zeitler, pick up Zeitler in free agency. Personally, I want to keep AVT where he's comfortable, keep him at his primary position, put him at guard, sign a tackle in free agency, draft a tackle, draft a Fashanu, draft a Fuaga, draft a Fatanu, someone of that type of nature. Bring in a guy. I'm hearing Bakhtiari to the Jets there's really good chance that happens, that the Jets are pretty linked to him. I mean, there is the Aaron Rodgers connection. Only thing I don't like about Bakhtiari is his knee, but if we could get him on a vet minimum and have him pass a physical, personally do that. Another name I'm hearing is Donovan Smith from the Chiefs is another name I'm hearing that the Jets are kind of linked to. What are your thoughts, and who do you think would be the better option for the Jets if they came down to kind of that budget ball type of play between Bakhtiari or Donovan Smith?
Yeah, I think that's a good point there, Connor. You know, I think they'll look like they did with John Simpson at left guard. You know, he's
Yes.
basically a budget acquisition. So I think they could look to do the same at tackle. One thing about Joe Douglas, he will always fill positions in free agency. That way he can go into the draft, you know, ostensibly not having to reach for a need. You know, you see that from Joe Douglas every year. And so that's why I think he might add a couple of tackles. But like you mentioned, you know, they always have the AVT option at tackle. Bakhtiari's had 5 knee surgeries in the last 3 years. I'm told he still wants to play. He's like practically brothers with Aaron Rodgers. They're extremely close. If you could get him, he's not going to play for the veteran minimum. I mean, a guy like that is not going to, you know, why would he subject himself to that at this point? But if you could get him at a moderately priced contract and tell him that, look, you'll be our starter for now, but there's a chance we're going to draft the guy and we might ask you to mentor him and be our swing tackle. I think that would be an appropriate role for a Bakhtiari, because I wouldn't entrust him with the entire position like the mistake they made with Dwayne Brown. going into this year. And Donovan Smith's a local guy. He grew up on Long Island in Hempstead. He played for a Super Bowl champion, so obviously there's some cachet there. I think he's probably an average player at best. So I don't know if I would trust him to be my answer at left tackle. I'd sign him as Bill Parcells used to call him hold the fort guys. So he'd be a hold the fort guy like Bakhtiari until I draft a tackle with the 10th pick.
All right, now I have a question. I have two things for you. Obviously, you mentioned Bakhtiari mentoring. I can definitely see that happen. Personally, I don't see him wanting to play on MetLife turf unless we paid him a significant amount of more money than other
Right. Well,
teams. He's the biggest like turf kind of guy. And the other thing is the going over to the Sampson signing, like you just mentioned. I look at that and I think it's a really good signing for the Jets. If you look at his film, he's a starter. He could be a starter. He's solid. But Robert Hunt really set the tone for that guard market when he agreed to that 5-year, $100 million contract with the Panthers. Like 20 million. He don't get me wrong, that guy is super talented, great guard, but $100 million for 5 years, $20 million a year is just out of this world.
that's crazy money, Connor. That's I wouldn't pay a guard that money. I mean, maybe if I had Gene Upshaw in his prime or something like that, or some John Hanna at guard, maybe. But no, that is just crazy money given out by a desperate team. And now with Simpson, the Jets didn't spend a lot of money. It's a 2-year contract. It's basically a 1-year contract. He's had an up and down career. He was benched with the Raiders. He was cut by the Raiders in the middle of the year. Kind of a reclamation project. Played for $1 million last year in Baltimore. Only $1 million. Played on a real talented offensive line. And to his credit, he started every game, including the playoffs. He'll bring some nasty to the running game. There's no question about that. His pass protection is spotty, and he commits a lot of penalties. I know from talking to people in Baltimore, that's what drove them crazy, just all the mistakes. I think it was 11 penalties last year. And so, a team like the Jets, who are among the leaders in penalties, obviously cannot have that. So, to me, he's a younger Laken Tomlinson and a cheaper Laken Tomlinson for sure. And so that's what they have there at left guard.
I agree, and I think there's a lot of what happens in free agency. I feel like kind of impacts our draft strategy. So let's say we do we do decide to play AVT at tackle and we draft another tackle. What does that mean for the draft? Do we trade back, or do we look to maybe a Bowers? So I do think a lot of what's happening right now really has to impact our draft strategy. And I really don't see the Jets going after Zeitler now that they signed Simpson, just because really don't see us needing two guards. And that I feel like they would only go after Zeitler if we felt that we were going to confident and we were putting AVT at tackle. I thought Zeitler, though, right out of free agency, was personally my number one guard. Well, that was affordable. Robert Hunt was probably the number one guard on the market, but I felt that he was affordable. But I know the offensive line, we basically need 3 new starters. But staying with the guys we have basically on this offensive line right now, well, 2 now that we signed Simpson, could you see a possibility of Carter Warren being a starting tackle next year, or do you see him being a swing guy and not really, maybe filling in for some injury, but not really being a set in stone starter for this team?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a set in stone starter. I mean, he did show some good things last year, but I don't think they see him as a day one or as like an opening day starter or anything like that. He could be a swing tackle. Um, yeah, I don't think they're quite there with him yet. I think AVT personally is better at guard, and I would like to see him play right guard this year. And so they would have to go out and get 2 tackles then. And so I could see them doing that. They might not be big name tackles or anything like that, but I could see them doing something like that. Even you mentioned Zeitler, even the guards who are still available. I mean, the guards, even the guys under the Robert Hunt category, they're getting like 10, 12 million a year, which is a lot of money. I don't think Joe Douglas wants to go there. Zeitler would be a solid addition, for maybe 8 million a year, but I don't think the Jets really want to go over the 10 million a year mark for a guard of that ilk. So So yeah, like I said, they'll draft someone, a Fuaga. That's been kind of my choice the entire time. I'd be really surprised if they picked Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. That would really surprise me. But you never know. You never know.
Let's head over to the draft now, like you mentioned. I mean, Mel Kiper had the Jets selecting Bowers at 10 in his mock draft, which is really interesting. We're seeing a lot of different things in this mock drafts. I know Daniel Jeremiah had Romo Dunze going at pick number 3, which I found really, really, really fascinating. As I don't know how Marvin Harrison is not going to go there. Bucky Brooks had 5 offensive linemen going in the top 7. So there are a bunch of different kind of strategies these analysts direction they're kind of going in. My ideal plan, if I could pick a plan, this would be my number one. I've dove into the draft and this is what I've settled to. Trade down to the 15-18 area, recoup your second round pick, go after maybe a Lad McConkey in the second round, someone of that elk who can kind of come in. I mean, he basically his draft stock went from here entering Mobile to all the way up here. I mean, he had an
Yeah.
incredible Senior Bowl, obviously solid combine too. So I'd take him in the second round, but I'd trade back to the 15-18 area and select Troy Fatano, the offensive lineman out of Washington. You can move him around. He's a solid guy, good wingspan. Really like him. I'd honestly rather do that than take a shot at a Fashanu at 10. The only way I'd stay there is if Alt fell to 10, which I mean Alt's not coming to 10. I'm gonna be
Probably
honest
not.
with you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably not.
he's not gonna fall to us. So have to kind of avert. And I like Fatano because he can really play almost everywhere on that offensive line, move him around, and that's what the Jets need. Players you can put basically anywhere. That's why I think leads me to someone who's on a completely different side of the ball but plays for the Jets is Ashton Davis. I think he needs to come back because he can also play 2 positions. He plays safety and then he also plays special teams. So I think 53 men on a roster, you got to make the most of every roster spot, and that's why I think Fatano is the right way to go in that draft. I like Bowers. Bowers is very, very talented. Don't get me wrong, but I really like Conklin. I want to give Ruckert a chance. I really don't want to waste a top 10 pick. I wouldn't say waste because he's solid, but I wouldn't want to give up a top 10 pick and go after a tight end when we have 2 guys that the Jets seem to be confident in.
You got a plan. It sounds like you got your blueprint already mapped out for the Jets. I think you got to text that to Joe Douglas and let him know. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, Connor. I think Joe Douglas probably will try to trade that back to get that second round pick back. That's just a gaping hole in your draft, that second round pick. And I know the Jets are happy that they got Rodgers for that, but it's still a gaping hole. So yeah, in a perfect world, you'd like to trade back, but who are you trading with? Who's coming up? It's got to be for a quarterback, right? You would think someone would want to come up
Yes,
for a quarterback.
McCarthy. Probably
But
McCarthy.
McCarthy's going to go in the top 10, so I think he'll be gone before the Jets pick. I mean, now
You
you have
you think so?
Minnesota. Minnesota's desperate for a quarterback now. No offense to my guy Sam Darnold, but they're going to have to draft a quarterback. Maybe the Raiders draft a quarterback. So you're going to see teams going over the Jets. Heck, the Giants might take McCarthy at 6. So the Atlanta Falcons could sell off their pick. They don't need a quarterback now. They just paid $1 zillion to Kirk Cousins. So they don't have to go draft a quarterback. So maybe they trade that pick. If the Jets stay at 10, no, I understand you want a versatile offensive lineman, and those are great, but you need that franchise left tackle. They thought Mekhi Becton was that guy.
Yes.
He was not that guy. You got to get that franchise left tackle. And to me, there's probably only 2 in the draft. It's Alt and Fashanu. And, Fuaga, maybe. Some people, or a lot of people think he's just a right tackle. So you have to make that decision, although right tackles get paid as much as left tackles do nowadays. So to me, you really want to get that franchise left tackle just to stick him there. You're DeBrickashaw Ferguson. You put him there for 10 years and you don't have to worry about him. That's what the Jets really need.
Basically what we're hoping Joe Tippmann to be, just on the other side of the offensive line. Kind of one more question, Rich, before we let you go. What do you think are some names Jets fans should keep their eyes on as officially players can sign contracts tomorrow? What do you think are some names that Jets fans should really keep their eyes on as free agency is just opened, really?
Well, I mean, the guys I think on their own team, you should keep an eye. I mean, I think
Mhm.
there's a really good chance that Thomas Morstead
Yes.
resigns in the next 24 to 48 hours. I think there's a chance that Justin Hardy comes back. I think Mekhi Becton won't come back. I think he's getting interest from at least three teams that I know of. So I think Mekhi will probably move on once that tackle market starts to move. I'm glancing down at my list here. That's why. Um, Among the other Jet guys. Again, we're looking at, we know Joe Douglas. I don't think he's, and plus all the good free agents, like all the splashy names are kind of gone now,
Yeah.
except for maybe like a Ridley. I thought we haven't talked about Tyrod Taylor. I thought that was a good pickup for the Jets. The only concern there is with his injuries. That's the durability, a little bit of an issue, but I think he'll be a real nice fit in the locker room. From what I understand from the Giants people, he's a real good team guy. So that's something you want in your backup quarterback. I think keep an eye on Bakhtiari, maybe Zeitler, Tyler Boyd at wide receiver. I think Solomon Thomas, I think there's a really good chance he comes back. Ashton Davis, I think there's a good chance he comes back. That's a really saturated safety market right now. Um, let's see who else. They're probably okay at corner. But, they brought in Isaiah Oliver, a guy that
Mhm.
Ulbrich had in Atlanta. So he's probably like your cornerback 5. Maybe replaces Bryce Hall. Uh, and I'm looking. Yeah, I think that's about it right now. I mean, they will sign a lot of veteran minimum type contracts, like 1 year kind of contracts. I wouldn't be surprised if they get a tight end. Um, Even though they brought back Kenny Yeboah, they did cut CJ Uzama, which by the way is not officially done yet. But
Yes.
I do think they'll probably add another veteran tight end in there. So I would keep an eye out for that. Also, a chance safety. Could they bring back Jordan Whitehead? I kind of doubt it, but I wouldn't rule it out. And so, yeah, you're going to see some classic Joe Douglas signings here, just like bargain basement type of guys who can go in and provide depth.
I agree. Parking guys. One more thing before we let you go. Is there any some other are there any buzz? Is there any buzz that you're hearing around the Jets during free agency that you could share with us, or has it been pretty Joe Douglas working night shifts?
Yeah. Well, it seems like he's working the night shift, doesn't it? That stuff didn't
Yeah.
start happening till about 11 o'clock last night. So the time I finished writing my last story, I think it was about 1:30 in the morning. But we haven't, Bryce Huff was a loss. That's some buzz around the Jets. Just from texting with a couple of players, I know they were happy for Bryce Huff that he got a huge bag of money. So good for him. Real disappointing that the Jets let one of their young top defensive players go. So that was some buzz around the Jets. And yeah, I mean, and just because I think a lot of people think that Joe Douglas doesn't start working until late at night, what happens is it's like they're talking to the agents all day. And a lot of times they'll say to the agent, look, we need an answer by the end of, at the end of the day. So sometimes that's the agent calling them back late at night and saying, okay, we'll take your offer. Or, okay, sorry, we're going to go with someone else. So that's why that happens sometimes. It's not like they're doing all this stuff late at night. Sometimes they are. We've seen a lot of Jet stuff happen. Brett Favre got traded at 1 o'clock in the morning to the Jets way back when. And so a lot of stuff does happen late at night. But last night just happened to be one of those crazy nights.
It was. Hopefully we can get. I mean, didn't really see much today. Hopefully we can get another good night in there. Mr. Cimini, Rich, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to thank you again, Connor. It's always
Of
a
course.
blast. You know your stuff, man. You know your
Thank you. I
stuff.
appreciate it.
You're going to do really well in this business. I have no doubt about that. And good luck on future podcasts and call anytime.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, JETS Jets, Jets, Jets.